Welcome to the S.M.I.L.E-ing Boys Podcast. This is a podcast that explores a public health approach to improving the mental health of Black boys while challenging the negative stereotypes often associated with this demographic in the society. This is a happiness research-informed podcast themed on the 8 pillars of happiness explored on my research trip to the top 5 happiest countries in the world. Now, isn't that cool? Welcome yet again to another S.M.I.L.E-ing Boys Podcast. As ever, I'm your host, K. Rufai, and I am looking forward to today's episode, as I am with every episode. Today, specifically, we are going to be delving into the pillar of happiness, which is money and wealth. How does that impact our happiness? How does that impact the way that young boys are socialized to navigate the world that they exist within? How does that connect to a lot of other things around youth violence or sense of worth? So we're going to explore that today. But as always, we're going to start with a bit of context of the research that I've done and some other kind of collated research. And then we're going to play a clip that chronicles an anecdotal experience within a classroom workshop with a bunch of young boys, and then we would kind of go deeply into that. I know most of us have heard this before. Money can't buy happiness, right? Or can it? That was super interesting to kind of try and explore and delve into the nitty-gritty of that. But when we look at research, we cannot avoid the conclusion that wealth does have an impact on happiness, right? Even though money can't buy happiness, but there is an intrinsic link there. Money is no guarantee for happiness, but a lack of money can easily lead to unhappiness. So that's really interesting. Money doesn't guarantee happiness, but a lack of money can easily lead to unhappiness. So while wealth has a definite impact on happiness, but who we compare ourselves to and what we use our wealth for are also key elements of our happiness. So this idea of comparison, social comparison, when we think about the internet, how does that impact our idea of happiness, and how does that then kind of also impact us when we think about the things we use our money for? So that's another kind of element around the research around wealth and money and how that really impacts our social behaviors. So there's something termed the Hedonic Treadmill, right? And scientists and sociologists and happiness researchers kind of explore that it means basically it's this continual thrive for a higher level of attainment, right? So when we kind of pedestalize what our ambitions are and we say, yes, I want to be able to lift 500 kg, dream on, for me, on a bench press, and for whatever reason, somehow miraculously I work my way and get there, then I lift up another kind of aspiration goal and say, okay, now I've hit 500 kg, I need to hit 800 kg. And what that does is it creates this hedonic treadmill where nothing is ever enough. So even though we kind of affix happiness to a particular achievement or a particular thing, whenever we reach that thing, we don't think, oh, I've reached the zenith of happiness now, but we always move that barrier much more. So we become almost like we're on a treadmill and we never actually reach a constant state of happiness because there's this treadmill of aspiration, achieve, set another one, achieve, and then we're just consistently going. So it's this idea of the hedonic treadmill when we start to think about how happiness actually becomes a state of flux, basically, and then a state of non-consistency within our kind of inherent self. And when we start to think about how this really plays out in the age of social media and the age of kind of constant gratification, especially with young people, you know, what are the impacts around that, and how can we nurture and create a space that actually starts to positively provide a much more holistic child and the way that we interact and relate with money in that context. So as always, I set the task for young people around money and I get them to really explore various things, but I just got some young people to really explore actually what is the concept of money and how does that impact their everyday lives and how does that impact their drive to achieve things. And yeah, I'll just play you some clips to listen to around that, and then we can kind of delve in as usual.
Cars are not going to be special, like shoes, like everyone's going to have it.
So why do those things need to be special?
Because not everyone has it, and you've earned it.
Is that the reason why you wake up in the morning Like, is that the reason why you come to school? So that you can be able to do those things?
Yeah. What's funny?
And so if we take away the idea of money, then you think life is pointless?
Basically, not necessarily, but in a way, because there's not really anything to like achieve. Money does a lot, it just does a lot. Without that, yeah, I don't even know what to say, but I can't explain my point. I wrote, it allows you to provide or treat loved ones. You feel financially secure, and there's more opportunity. For the negative, you it attracts a lot of jealousy. And your attitude could change, and you have less opportunity.
You can afford accessories, you get fame, and you have more opportunities. That's it.
How about not having money?
Not having money, three good things. Peaceful, it's humbling, and I didn't put a third one.
Okay, that's great. Who agrees that not having money is peaceful?
It can be peaceful, but at the same time, you're going through struggle, so...
Great. So, I'm intrigued to know what some of the thoughts around listening to those clips are. What are our own thoughts around these ideas? So I guess, in the comment section, just let me know. Do you think life is pointless without money? That's the first theme. That's something that was raised when one of the young people spoke, and I asked the question, do we think life is pointless without money? If we don't have to wake up to go to work, especially in these times when we think about COVID and isolation, and just how that's impacted a lot of people's financial structure, myself included, and how has that impacted our standard of life, our standard of living, our drive, our motivation. That's something that's super interesting to really kind of segue into at some point. But specifically around, the idea of asking this question to young people around, what's their purpose of coming to school and studying, and how closely linked that is to money. It's so interesting hearing, a young person say, that the ability to be able to buy cars and buy all these shoes and all these latest things, which obviously I'm also a participator in that system and that model of capitalism, of this idea of wanting and buying and, all of that. But there's a question that needs to come along with that. How much of that is a sense of value searching, and how much of that is affixed to what has been told to us that value equates to, one of the biggest questions I asked these young people in particular was around, so if money didn't exist, would they still want to come into school and study what they're studying? Would they still have the aspirations to do the things that they have in their mind as to what they want to do when they get into college and things like that? And someone was like, nah, that would be pointless, man. I would just rather not do none of that stuff. And the whole idea of that question for me was around trying to get them to think about, how can you craft a world that's based upon ambition that is linked to your own purpose and core? Because if there is that, no matter whether or not money is the outcome, there still is a drive to do those things irrespective. And that's what I had to kind of introspect around these times, these isolation, self-distancing, COVID-19 times, thinking about the fact that now, am I purposeless because I cannot get out and work with young people and do all these various work that I do around, masculinity and young boys and youth work and all these other things that I'm super inspired and passionate to do. At first, there was this feeling within myself, which was more about, man, like I can't really do what I'm meant to do. My purpose is like halted. I'm stuck in a house. I can't connect with young people. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I really had to really explore that and think actually, yes, I lost some money. But even if money was not a thing, would I still want to do this? Would I still want to, connect with young people? Would I still want to make the impact that I'm trying to make? Would I still want to empower, inspire young people in the ways that I do in my work? And I was like, of course I would. And that's obviously the ultimate reason behind why I created the brand that I created and what my goal is as a human to do. And I thought, take money away from that, I would still have the desire to do that. And of course that sounds really utopic and really like, how you gonna pay for your bills, how you gonna buy those dungarees that you love, all of that stuff, right? And obviously that is a vital question, but then the question is around, what do we need and what do I need, and how much of that is just this insatiable capitalistic desire that has been entrenched within me. And that's also the bigger question I've been asking the young people, and also asking, you guys, the viewers, the listeners, what is the drive that gets you up in the morning? And especially with, thinking about this with young people and thinking about how is this information being fed to them and to us, that this idea of buying, this idea of trying to achieve something that somebody else doesn't have. Because that's one of the young people was saying, that if money wasn't a thing, then buying fancy cars wouldn't really be as gratifying, because then either everybody has it or everybody doesn't have it. So it's like, what's the point? Because you can't really flex on somebody because you've worked so hard to make this money. Now you could buy yourself this thing that nobody else has, and now you can flex on them and feel like, oh, I'm much more valued in society than this person. So really trying to deconstruct that idea with the young people, and understanding that money is the be all and end all of everything, and money is the purpose of our existence, and money is the reason why we come to school, and money is the reason why people get treated better than other people, and these are things that have been reinforced and affirmed in different things in our society. When we look at class structure, we look at the way that kids are being, the kind of educational resources that some kids have versus other kids or other neighborhoods or other schools, thinking about the people who, their parents have a lot of money, and they go to specific schools, private schools or whatever, and they have access to so many things, books, all these other resources in certain areas. I have to pay for books for kids to be able to write in for their workshops, because the school just doesn't have the budget to be able to pay for that. So it's really interesting when you start to look at how this message is being reinforced and actually passed down to young people in every sort of medium and structure that they engage in, so it's really interesting trying to deconstruct that and trying to think, wow, man, this is deeply entrenched in everything. And we look at all the music and the films that are consumed by a lot of young people and us as a whole, and what we've been socialized to consume. When we look at the people who are the heroes or the most coolest people in the films, they're the ones that got all the stuff. They got all the cars, they got all the money, they got all the house, and then along that comes all the trappings of patriarchy, the girls and all the fancy things, and then you get more favor in the clubs and every other place you're trying to go to. And these are things that are really appealing to young people. I was a young person that was like enamored by looking at things like that and just thinking, man, that's what I want to be, man. I want to be able to buy all of that stuff. I want to be able to get all the Jordans. I want to be able to get all the cars, and then all the girls will follow. And super important to really understand how deeply entrenched these things are in a society, and how we can start to kind of create a world that values these things much less. Because when we think about the impact and the stronghold of capitalism as a byproduct of patriarchy, we start to see that this doesn't serve us in the long term. It serves a minority few, the white imperialist minority few, and how that is something that we need to try and slowly start to deconstruct and really actively and consciously understand how we participate in it, and also still be held accountable in the moments that we perpetuate that to young people. Because I try and think about a lot of the partnerships that I'm creating and trying to create. There's a lot of these big brands that are really interested in the S.M.I.L.E.ing Boys, and they're really talking about what they want to do. And for me, it's really trying to be responsible and thinking actually how much of what you're doing is also feeding this insatiable capitalist hunger that these young people have, which ends up being the reason why they're coerced into doing all these negative things, because they think, oh, I'm going to get this amount of money and then I can afford this and then buy this brand. And therefore these brands look at it as an easy win for them to partner with me and then be like, oh yes, at least we got this demographic coming in, because we, and it's really trying to be very responsible around that and try and think about, what's the bigger picture and what's the real social responsibility there. And those, and this is something going out to a lot of change makers and innovative brands, thinking about what's the social responsibility, not just around, oh, okay, we have this money, we need to be doing good things with it, but actually in the bigger picture, the brand and the brand message, how much of that is actually participatory towards the increase in youth violence because of this capitalist agenda that's been created and perpetuated by either the adverts or the story that you tell these young people in your content and your branding. So it's really important to really start to think about these things and deconstruct that, so as to really understand the societal impact of these ideas when we think about young people and this desire to just keep buying and making money and doing all we need to do, any means necessary, getting the money, getting the bread, and that's something that, again, I've been a victim of and a contributor in, and it's something that I'm slowly working on trying to deconstruct and really trying to be critical and be very conscious about. But it's important to just consistently ask the question. So when we think about, the music that's out there, the films and all that kind of stuff, how can we also participate in not stopping young people from watching these things? Because that's not the conversation at all. It's almost trying to engage critical thinking and discussion in that process. When they watch or listen to a particular song, you sit them down and say, oh, what do you like about that person? What is it that they're saying? And they start to ask the follow-up question. Oh yeah, they said this about girls. Yeah, okay, cool. They said this about money, about getting the Ferrari, yeah, about the Lambo. Cool. Okay, so let's discuss that further. Why does that make you think, oh man, he's cool, he's living a good life? What are the, start to get them to critically, engage themselves and actually start to understand that some of these things are a facade, all these ideas that are perpetuated, again, through industries that are governed by patriarchal structures that want to perpetuate a message so that they can continually feed the capitalist idea. So really getting to, educate young people around the bigger picture, the bigger industry, that feeds ideas that are often negative in the long term when we think about whose communities it impacts. And often it's always communities of minority groups and black communities for the most part. So I guess my thing is just about trying to engage young people in more discussion, be aware as a brand, as a company, what type of messages we're perpetuating and how we also feed in this narrative that also fuels this increasing youth violence and this desire for young people to buy things and want to own things, so they're not left out, so they're not laughed at, so they don't feel like they don't have a purpose in life. Because ultimately, having a purpose is often aligned with making the money, but can those two things exist separately? That's the question, and that's the journey, and that's something to really explore and think about. So yeah, I guess I would like to hear some kind of media or films that we can actually start promoting and encouraging young people to watch, so they can engage in discussion around the ideas of those films. So films that model positive ideas of relationship with money and masculinity, films that really question and interrogate critically, but also in very interesting ways, the idea of our relationship to money and the things that money brings, and how happiness intrinsically is not achieved by money, but actually the lack thereof, and how we can kind of create interesting debates and discussions with young people around that. So yeah, any films. I mean, in my head, I think of Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is a beautiful film that explores masculinity and touches a little bit on possession and money and things like that, which is a really interesting film. And I'd love to hear some other interesting and amazing recommendations that we can kind of start to promote out to young people to engage in discussion. So that's the first kind of exploration of how money impacts us and young people as a whole, and this particular pillar would have a lot of different episodes, so look out for the next episode. The next episode is super interesting. It talks about how specific young people make a particular amount of money and what are their ways. A lot of it are so intriguing and often obviously problematic for young people at that age having access to those types of ways. But stay tuned to the next episode and look forward to delving further into this particular pillar of happiness. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Today's been a nicely exciting episode, and I hope you guys find it that way. Do leave your thoughts, your comments, share it, rate it, amplify it, send it to people that need to get in touch, do cascade that out to young people as well. And do check the links in the bio as well, in the description. Check out the website, check out the Guardian interview, and get in touch to be able to deliver and design things specifically for young people. Peace and love. See you on the next episode.